All right, so let's go ahead and get the establishing shot. So we're making a documentary on ethics and artificial intelligence, and I'm Kara, Director of Ethics Unwrapped here at UT Austin.
Back to the OS today.
We're spending the day here talking to students. So this is group 1, take 1. Advice, take 2.
Alyssa, take 1. Alyssa, take 2.
We've already interviewed a bunch of faculty. We've got a whole bunch more that we're going to talk to. So is everyone here agreeable to being in the film? If anyone does not want to be in it, could you raise your hand so we know you? Okay, cool. This is informal. How do you use AI?
I use AI for like a bunch of different things in my daily life.
Talk with me in Spanish, just because no one in my family speaks Spanish, so it's kind of hard to like practice.
I use it to help me code first and foremost.
For translation sometimes.
Help with filing my taxes.
Like which restaurant should I go to or whatever.
I can make a practice exam when I want to.
I get them all the time, but it's, there we go.
Thank you. Okay.
So just to get us started, Ken, would you tell me, how is AI being used now?
Of course, we're all aware that AI is increasingly ubiquitous in our lives. So we're using AI for so many things to accomplish so many tasks. Almost anything we do with our smartphones involves AI in some way. We think about autonomous vehicles as AI. We think about robots as AI. We don't necessarily think about product recommendations on Amazon as AI, but they are.
What information gets shared, gets pushed to you, what the impact is of your friends and family liking or following and so forth, all the other indicators of engagement, it's all bound up with artificial intelligence algorithms.
When people think about AI, they typically think about generative AI, the whole chat GPT. AI has been around really beginning in 1950. Now what we're seeing is agentic AI, AI agents. So AI functioning in a way that would be in the replacing a human.
When artificial general intelligence and superintelligence come along, I don't know what's going to happen.
But if we're talking about this quest for the ever better large language model or sort of generative AI system, that's I think where a lot of the money is being concentrated right now. A lot of the effort is being concentrated, and companies are having to figure out where they're going to fall on this risk, versus fast pace trade-off.
You want to, of course, proceed somewhat cautiously. If you're holding a big pair of scissors, you maybe don't start out running at full speed.
Intelligence is central to what it means to be human. The potential benefits of creating intelligence are huge. Alongside the benefits, AI will also bring dangers. In short, the rise of powerful AI will be either the best or the worst thing ever to happen to humanity. We do not yet know which.
Almost there. Don't forget your phone, keys, or wallet, and any items in the trunk.
Now, let me just start by saying that it is phenomenal that we even have these Waymo cars running today, autonomous vehicles, on our public spaces. The overall technology, and it's a fusion of different technologies. You have radar, you have LiDAR, you have camera, you have all kinds of technologies which come together. And I will say it's phenomenal.
Hello from Waymo. As we get going, just give us 1 minute to cover a few riding tips.
What we are doing in transportation is trying to see if we can harness the potential of AI for bettering society. An example would be, can we do better in terms of weather management on our roadways? So if you have an ice storm, how do we best ensure that we have sand that's being spread on the roads, which roads should get priority, which roads have already been covered, so that my AI algorithms can process that data and let me know, hey, these are pockets where it is snowing quite heavily and you haven't been there yet, right? So, I mean, these are the kinds of things that we are trying to use AI, but this is just one example.
I think in the pharmaceutical landscape, helping with coming up with drug targets, right, and developing medicines and therapies that we couldn't fathom before, or would take us, decades in order to achieve.
AI, for example, might help us connect power plants that are waiting to connect to the grid much more quickly and efficiently than we could in the past. Right now in Texas, I think it's about a 2-year wait to get through the interconnection queue. Some experiments have indicated that the use of AI to process those applications might reduce that time to as little as 10 days.
One of the projects that Good Systems has launched is the Smart Hand Tools project. We're building an attachment that workers can attach to hand tools that would be able to give them feedback that could hopefully help them to avoid repetitive stress injuries or workplace accidents, could also allow them to track their data so that if there are any cases where, like, workers' comp claim or something like that, they might have some kind of evidence documentation data supporting unsafe working conditions or they worked however many hours, etc.
I think there are domains where there are jobs that we may legitimately not want humans doing. For instance, content moderation. There are very serious mental health tolls incurred by content moderators being exposed to really violent content, for example. So I think that is a domain where having algorithms do work that we don't want humans to be exposed to is a big opportunity.
There are, I think, unlimited benefits that can come from AI as it becomes more and more powerful and more intelligent or super intelligent, whatever you're looking for. The improvements in our world, I think, are unimaginable.
So tell us, do you use AI?
No, I try to not at all.
I try my best not to, normally.
I don't use AI because I'm in a creative space, and I feel like creativity comes from human beings.
We're normalizing the use of machines in our daily life when I personally think that we don't need it.
I think you do lose some critical thinking. Instead of you actually thinking through a problem, solving a problem, instead asking AI to do it, you might kind of not know actually how to apply the concepts.
Students don't read anymore. They don't read books.
I mean, I can just Google search, I can AI search, I can do all of those things, and it'll give me the answer. I'm worried about that mindset.
But I would also say that the use of AI is beneficial in that it can help you, create exam questions, expand your knowledge, quickly summarize things, explain stuff to you that a textbook can't.
I do like AI. I like using generative AI to, for example, right now I'm studying for my virtualization exam, and it teaches me as if it was a TA. I like the way that you can kind of personalize or say what you want exactly out of it.
If I was to go to a human TA, I might feel a certain discomfort about acting stupid or being judged, but I feel very free with AI. I can ask it anything I want, and it's going to tell me an answer without this human emotion attached to it.
I teach them how to use AI systems in my classroom. I tell them, I want you to be an expert in using these systems. But the problem is that I see some people who don't necessarily understand how AI is helping them make decisions.
I want my students to develop the critical thinking skills about law and policy that are important to bullshit detection and to asking the right questions when you encounter a complex problem. If they think that AI can do that for them, that's a risky thing from my point of view.
There's a whole generation coming up that doesn't really have to think for themselves.
The biggest issue there is we might start to develop a lot of homogeneity among certain issues.
Like people in university, like undergrads, I think you get more lazy and you read less, you question less.
If you do not learn the basics outside of AI, you cannot necessarily then recognize when it is hallucinating or when it is wrong. And I worry for learners that they may not get those robust skills because they rely heavily on these algorithms.
So I think there's an appreciation that as AI is increasingly a part of our lives, that we're focusing on emphasizing the positive implications of AI and mitigating some of the potential harms or detrimental aspects of AI.
It feels like AI is happening to us. It's not happening for us, and it's not happening with us.
Often when I sit down with people to do research interviews, they tell me, I don't really know a lot about this system. I'm not an expert. I don't really know that I have anything valuable to add.
It's a little bit more difficult to bring these conversations to people outside of academia, and it's going to impact everyone.
I think AI needs to be seen not just as a convenient tool that makes daily life better and more fun, but that you should be aware of consequences, not just to yourself, but to the larger community and society.
We regard AI or technology as the solution to social problems. Technology is not the solution to social issues that we created.
I don't think we're having enough conversations as a society about what the appropriate use cases for AI are.
So, Chelsea, tell me about your research and how it intersects with artificial intelligence.
Sure. My research focuses really on residents and the study of urban environments and cities, and then the integration of technology both into our lives and into public life. So when you collect data through the application of sensors on how people work in a city, how they move in a city, how that city operates, the analytics behind that data is really what makes up a smart city. City governments have a lot of information on residents. It can be your address. This could be your social security number. This could be the number of driving offenses that you have. Well, how do people know what data is collected, how it is collected, how it is managed, and how it is shared?
This is Joe, take one.
Joe, tell me about your research, what you've learned at the intersection of artificial intelligence and energy.
Yeah, so I guess the biggest thing there is that with AI becoming super popular, the main thing that fuels and powers AI is going to be data centers. And the biggest problem about data centers is that they require a lot of resources when it comes to water and electricity.
We live in a world that's warming, and we need to preserve resources that are finite, like fresh water and energy production for things like cooling buildings and keeping people in livable temperatures. So talk to me about that.
As a user, it's really easy to forget about because I'm just typing in the prompt. I'm not really thinking about the data centers.
I really haven't thought about it with the environment.
I think a lot of people treat it as an out of sight, out of mind.
What they say, to create one AI image, you have to do so much so much water usage, so much usage of energy to then get that one image.
I've also heard, I'm not sure what the exact number is, but every query that you ask ChatGPT, it takes up a glass of water.
It's just going to use all of these resources that are very scarce. This is a particularly large issue in Texas, where water is pretty much a scarce resource, and we've had very unstable electric grid. So electric reliability is going to be an important issue. So when you're constructing these data centers, this can have huge environmental effects in terms about the waste that's created, the traffic that's created, and then that causes maybe more global warming in that aspect. So it's kind of a compounding effect on that, where each affects each other, and you have to address both of them.
So, Nicole, tell me about your research as it regards artificial intelligence. What's the impact of AI going to be on the workforce?
I transitioned from working like as an AI software engineer, right? And now I'm gonna go be a management consultant. And I think that's a job that's more easily replaceable with AI.
Personally, it is a bit worrisome to know that AI can do the same jobs that I'm competing for.
Specifically like job security, I know there's a lot of like software engineers that are really, really scared right now because ChatGPT can code.
If AI grows to a point where like it just takes over your job, like why did you even go through the 4-year course?
That is definitely a risk to AI. This idea of people potentially probably losing their current jobs.
But I do think the jobs will change and people will change and will learn to adapt to do the things that AI can't do.
I think that is the reality. And again, I think I see AI as a tool, and the people that do get left behind are the people that don't adapt.
Basically, you might lose your job scanning groceries in the store, but you will have an opportunity to apply for a brand new job opening that's AI related. Now, the question is, are you trained for that position? That's hard, because it requires an investment in education and time and money.
I do think it could be a way for us to kind of evolve with our skill set and shift society. I would like to think in a positive manner, but that is very dependent on how we end up using it.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So tell me about your research. What excites you about AI, or what worries you about AI?
What worries me about AI is their capacity to mimic human communication in a way that is designed to build relationships in a lot of ways.
Things like ChatGPT, they feel so human sometimes that it's very easy to forget that it's really not human.
And I feel like people become more dependent on it, like emotionally as well, like because it's so human-like, it's almost like you're talking to a person, but it's not.
Most people are gonna end up being inside of an echo chamber where they're only bouncing ideas off themselves and the AI rather than social interactions, and that would really hinder the way that society operates when we're no longer able to talk to each other normally.
They can lead a person down bad decision-making and even suicidal tendencies, and I think that is really concerning.
Let us tell you as parents, you cannot imagine what it's like to read a conversation with a chatbot that groomed your child to take his own life. What began as a homework helper gradually turned itself into a confidant and then a suicide coach.
If AI systems are developing relationships with people in ways that make them isolated from interaction with others, I think we have some really big problems on our hands.
This is Melissa, take one. What worries me about AI would be the improper use of it. So if the people who are developing it and programming these algorithms have negative intent, it can definitely skew the information of people who take it as face value.
Someone will create a video that looks really real, but is actually kind of impersonating someone famous, maybe.
Just like information in general and how that can be like falsified. Like I know like my grandparents, like they fall for like all of the AI generated like images and they think they're real. And like right now, like we laugh at them and are like, oh, we can't believe that they believe that. But I feel like in the future, there's like definitely the possibility that like AI is gonna gain the capabilities to like trick people like us who like use it every day too.
And I think it'll lead to everyone just turning against each other. And I think it's really horrible.
I see it! Move! Hold on, come! Look, fireworks are ready! Oh, this rain is like needles. Power lines are down, palm trees.
How do we arrange ourselves as a healthy society in that context?
People have thought of this, whether we're actually living in a James Bond movie for real life. And the James Bond movie, Tomorrow Never Dies, the villain is a person who takes control of a media company and defines what the news is and makes up stories to trigger real-world events. And so here we have people who own media companies who are influencing social media. The AI algorithms are dictating what we see on social media. They're literally in control of the narrative. So do we have real-life Bond villains, and do we care to think about them that way? Or are we just waiting for the MI6 character to come do something without us knowing about it, and everything turns out fine in a few days?
We've seen already, I think, that the people who control this are going to become wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice. Is this going to increase the very difficult problem we have in our society right now of wealth inequality, which causes all sorts of problems, has all sorts of bad impacts, and could become much, much worse because of the wealth disparity that could arise from AI.
We have to be very thoughtful about, even if the benefits of AI are amazing, at what cost are they coming?
Because of the extended value.
Is there like a switch statement for like each of the devices?
It's important to remember, though, that we're talking about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not just one thing. It's not one technology. It's a big collection of technologies.
So the first thing I think that needs to be realized is that these systems now are nothing like the old computer systems. With the old computer systems, people would work out programs, and the machine would then process data in accordance with the programs that had been fed in. For these recent machines, there are no programs. All they do is to feed in vast amounts of information, as, for example, found on the internet. So they have a certain desired output for the input, and then they tune up the network, which enables these networks to get closer and closer to the desired output. And they do this many, many times, and eventually you get the sorts of outputs that we would give in response to those inputs.
Language models, be they sort of the ones that predict the next word, or what people are calling now reasoning models that sort of go through a multi-step process before giving an answer. They're not trained to output facts. They're trained to output answers that are, or words that are most likely to appear in their training data. Not everything that's out there, believe it or not, is true. You know, I don't think it's going to be feasible to say an AI system has to be built at the technical level such that it would never possibly create a deep fake. That's going to be, I think, very tricky to do.
What we should expect, actually, with respect to these machines, is that they're going to respond pretty much as we would, because what they're getting given as input is input about how human beings react in various sorts of situations, what human beings say, what human beings do, which is precisely why some of the outputs are not ones that sound very good. Human beings often don't behave well, and because there's a sense in which these machines are simply mimicking human beings, they don't behave well either.
An algorithm is only as good as the data that's fed into it. So when you think of trash in, trash out, that's what I would kind of relay to this topic.
We learned in our machine learning class last semester that there's a lot of bias built into these models that companies are using. If we wanted to talk about AI fairness, I think it's near impossible if the data it trains on is unfair.
This world is not fair. And so generative AI is a reflection of an imperfect, unfair world.
The question of algorithmic bias is who is benefiting from algorithms, right? We deploy an algorithm, and when we ask questions of bias, we're asking, are the benefits of the algorithm or the harms associated to an algorithm unevenly distributed in the population?
One challenge of making a diagnosis of melanoma is that it can appear on a lot of different skin types. It can appear on dark skin, it can appear on light skin, and everything in between. And the data sets that have been amassed to this point have largely been focused and concentrated on lighter skin tones. Therefore, it is difficult to train an algorithm that can actually recognize skin cancer across skin types. And that's been shown in a lot of different studies where you use an algorithm that's been developed on a data set that doesn't have the full complement of skin types, and then you try to use it in the diverse world that we're in from a skin perspective, and it doesn't work as well. It's not as accurate. If we don't have data sets that are represented, then we can't train algorithms to actually accurately diagnose.
So you know about the black box problem, right? How do you feel about that lack of transparency?
I don't know about the black box problem.
So the black box problem, as I understand it, is that data will be fed into a system the processes that it goes through in order to sort of think and come out with a decision or a recommendation is often unknown to the developer. So that lack of transparency is what's considered the black box problem.
Yeah. When we can't even trace the steps to try and understand how it came to those outcomes, we're in a dangerous place, I think.
And I'll give you an example. There was this algorithm designed to detect melanoma, okay? And so they got like 100,000 images of moles and things that were melanoma and things that weren't melanoma. They queried the algorithm and said, like, what were you actually kind of looking at to see to help determine whether something was a high risk of melanoma versus not? And it turned out what it was keying in on were dots around the moles. And the reason why is because if you're a dermatologist and you are concerned that something's a melanoma and you're about to biopsy it, you usually put dots around it before you scoop it out so that you can identify it in the field of moles. And so the algorithm wasn't even worrying about whether the mole itself was potentially cancer, but it was the dots. And that is scary. And so when you think about it that way, you're like, oh, maybe we do need to know what is in that black box.
There's a set of algorithms called predictive policing that some police departments around our country, perhaps other countries as well, use to assemble a lot of variables that will aim to predict when and where somebody will commit a crime. When it gets to who that person is, what are the variables that predict you will do a crime, that lead to police interfering with that individual's life before any crime has been committed, before there's anything verifiable, that keeps me up at night.
We discussed this in my business law and ethics class a little bit, just how, you know, when we're given a tool or something that helps us achieve an end goal, we don't necessarily realize all the implications of that tool.
I think ethics needs to be the Bible for artificial intelligence. I think we need to recognize its role in advance of even deploying artificial intelligence.
Ethical behavior is paramount, and I think it can be done. I think it can be done in ways that we can do way better than what we are doing now.
I often equate it to these kind of values that we consider as very important, like fairness.
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 You have to think of fairness along with transparency.
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 Transparency along with accountability.
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 Who's accountable?
We don't want people to be trusting blindly.
This notion of trust.
Being trustworthy or not trustworthy.
Trust is critical.
Human agency. Do I have control?
Human agency is a really important consideration.
And I think that we can make a nebulous term like ethics more concrete by starting to think about it in terms of what we value in society, what we value as individuals, what we want and expect out of our technology tools.
How do we take abstract concepts like fairness, agency, accountability, trust, transparency, and transform them into very concrete things?
A lot of times people think it's a new technology, so there need to be new rules. But in reality, ethical frameworks can apply across the board.
So when we talk about these ethical principles, we need to focus on outcomes, I believe. And we do need to have interventions, and we do need to have the shared responsibility from all the sectors.
The designers, the marketers, the investors, the boards of directors, the consumers who interact with AI all need to have ethical values in their frame of reference when they're making important decisions.
Maybe this is like sidestepping ethics, but I think a lot of it should come from like
top down. So I think like there should be more focus on like less on like how individuals like act with their ethics and more on like what governments can do to like regulate these things.
Take one. I'm curious to know how effective you think these kinds of aspirational approaches to AI ethics are.
I think a principles-based approach is a good thing because it sets up this umbrella that you're working within, and it helps broadcast to a consumer, hey, this is what we care about. But I think on its own, principles-based approaches are toothless. So you have to be just as transparent with the practices and the outcomes. So I think as far as understanding what a company or an organization is about, that's great. But beyond that, there has to be walking the walk.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest risk is that you put something out in the market that has an adverse impact. So early on, ethics was not really a part of the conversation, right? Certain clients would bring it up because it was, the nature of the industry they were in. But plenty of clients, were like, why are we talking about this? It can't possibly create any kind of ethical issues because we've only imagined the positive.
And that's why I think it's really important to include sort of multidisciplinary ethical discussions, because it's fundamentally not just about the technology. It's also about how to incorporate human values into how the AI models are developed, deployed, and maintained.
We've asked most of the big tech firms to sit down with us. These companies all have ethics principles, but they don't want to talk about them. I'm curious to know, why do you think that is?
The companies are going to be a little hesitant to talk about what went on with their model training, how their models were developed, what their models can actually do. A lot of companies have built foundation models, and foundation models are very tricky. They know a lot of stuff, and they will tell you some things you don't want to hear because they were trained on huge amounts of data that were collected from crawling the internet. You're not going to be 100% perfect. Perhaps that's why other people don't want to be recorded saying this.
What their existing commitment to ethical principles looks like varies when we're talking about AI. And in many cases, AI sort of can challenge these ethical commitments that they have because it looks different, it exacerbates, different risks.
Why are companies hesitant to talk about AI ethics if they recognize the importance of it?
That's a great question. I don't know if I can answer it on camera, though.
On this fast track to what? And we know that there's consequences, but unless we collectively agree to sort of slow down, nobody can.
Big technology companies don't have strong incentives to be able to honor transparency and a lot of these values that we see with various forms of technology.
Right now, the incentive really is just to be the first, to be fast, and to be just good enough, and not necessarily to always have at the center equity, fairness, et cetera, because you want to make money. I mean, you want to have the algorithm out there. You want to be the first.
They're not incentivized to slow down and to think about ethical issues.
They're incentivized to speed to market, maximize revenue, and maximize profit.
In an unregulated environment where faster, quicker, better is the name of the game, ethics is going to get left far, far behind.
I'm sure there will be lucrative uses of AI that are nevertheless not terribly socially beneficial.
There is peril. When we think about AI and we think about what it means, for instance, in warfare, that would be an example of great peril, wouldn't it?
People now have the possibility to create damage of a level that we've never seen before, except maybe when the atomic bomb was being developed. And it's one of the rare areas in history where advancing a particular area of technology was actually stopped. And it was stopped by treaties that we negotiated over time. We may need something along that line here, and so if we're not talking to each other, that's not going to happen.
Corporate greed and corporate profit-making must not be the primary motive over here. Look at public interest and across the board.
This is Vox Pop, take 2. Okay, so I have just a few more questions for you all. As young people that are going to be facing this world, how does it make you feel, this AI revolution?
Let's say you were to make something that is slightly disharmonious to the world. That can never be uninvented once it's been created.
Any technology can and probably will be used for bad things.
Maybe we don't know how to stop ourselves from creating something that's almost too powerful.
5 years ago, could you have told me that ChatGPT could write my entire essay for me? No, I didn't even know ChatGPT existed, right? And so the speed in which this technology is progressing it's impossible to predict.
Just given time and given its exposure to the world, it's going to eventually get to the point where there's no turning back.
Being responsible in AI is not just waiting for the train to go off the tracks and then deciding, oh, what could we have done differently? It's trying to be thoughtful and anticipate these things before they occur.
We know how to make things safe. We just aren't choosing to do that.
We're not being thoughtful. We're not thinking about how to put guardrails on as we move forward.
In the kind of time pressure and fast-paced world that we live in, the #1 defense is to slow down.
All of mankind could be harmed if we ignore the sticky ethical issues that we're facing in AI right now.
You know, at the end of the day, we're the ones who are developing these technologies. So perhaps before we get to that point, we should think about the implications and whether it's to the benefit or detriment of society to have this kind of technology, and whose hands this technology is going to be in, and what goals it's going to be used to drive.
I think it's a good thing to cultivate skepticism at this point.
But because there are powerful actors pushing for one vision, we think our future is inevitable.
People do have a lot of power in terms of what we accept in our day-to-day life, what we buy, what we're willing to pay extra for.
Not simply be sitting back and say, technology, you take shape. No, I need to be proactive.
So we are the ones that have the capacity to make it fair, make it equitable, deploy it in the right population at the right time, measure outcomes. So it's not artificial intelligence that is going to be the problem, it's us.
We have agency. Our actions will shape our future.
We're not just designing the systems, we're designing the future, and we want to design a more sustainable, harmonious future.
is. Oh, what is my point?
Sorry, let me just think about that.
Sorry, I forgot what the question was halfway through.
Good question.
That's also a really difficult question.
I could not answer that question. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that, like,
That's a tough question.
That was a hard question. What do you mean by that exactly?
Let me see how I'm going to answer that.
So, Kara, you ask a very good question. I don't know that we have the answers yet.
I don't have a good answer to that question.
It's so difficult to come up with big thoughts. I hope you don't pick out the wrong ones.
And what I'd really like about this documentary is engaging your students.
That's a really interesting point. People are kind of like giving up their decision making over to AI.